Hello, welcome to World Now. Let's begin in Afghanistan, where an explosion has killed at least 21 people and wounded more than 33 others after a bombing at a mosque in the capital, Kabul, during evening prayers on Wednesday. The Taliban government spokesman, Zabihullah Mujahid, earlier confirmed the number of the dead and wounded. There has not been an immediate claim of responsibility for the blast, and the government has not publicly assigned blame. Afghanistan's Director of Emergency says his hospital had received 35 patients injured in the blast. Joining me now from the United States capital, Washington, D.C., to discuss the Afghanistan situation is a member of the Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce, Doug Brooks. Thank you so much for joining us on World Now. It's a year to the day since the Taliban entered Kabul unchallenged and took control of Afghanistan, transforming the lives of millions of people. Do Afghans feel differently?
Yeah, it's been a really difficult year, not just for the Afghans in Afghanistan, but the many who have fled and have been trying to get to other countries, especially to the United States. It's been very trying.
Well, looking at part of the Doha agreement negotiated in February 2020 between the U.S. and the Taliban was that if U.S. forces withdrew from the country, then the Taliban would not allow their old allies, Al Qaeda, to reestablish their presence in the country. Does the return of the Taliban has meant international terrorist groups are able to reestablish themselves in the country?
Well, the Taliban had a special relationship with Al Qaeda, and obviously that continued, even though they denied that at Doha and other places. That was really a one-off, I think. I don't know that the Taliban are supporting other terrorist groups, but clearly, the head of the Al Qaeda to be basically right in the middle of Kabul, in an area that a lot of Taliban leaders live. That was a clear sign that they're still very cozy with Al Qaeda. Does that mean that the Taliban will support other terrorist groups or that they won't? Well, we don't know yet. The Taliban, if there's one thing we've learned over the past year, is that there's no real single leader to the Taliban. There are many different leaders and committees and so on, and it's very hard to get a clear message on about anything.
Mm. Well, it's good to see people opening their hearts and homes to Ukrainian refugees as the Russia-Ukraine war, rages on. But was the same offered to refugees from Afghanistan, especially in the UK and the US?
In the U.S., sure, there's been tens of thousands of Afghans have made it to the United States through various programs. They're being settled around the United States. With a 20-year history and a military relationship with Afghanistan, there's veterans organizations in the United States that have taken the lead in helping to resettle Afghan families. They're all over the United States now. There's a fairly effective program that when Afghan families come in, they are oriented. They're sent to various communities all over the United States that are welcoming them. The United States also happens to be having a labor shortage, so finding jobs for them has not been as difficult as might be expected. There's already an Afghan community in the United States that dates back to the Russian invasion in 1979. So there's family connections. There's a lot of will towards them. So yes, the Ukrainian refugees are welcome, but there's a lot more Afghans in the U.S. right now, and they are being welcomed.
Mm. Well, now let's look at the girls and their fate in Afghanistan since the Taliban took over. It's clear that hardline clerics are resisting letting girls return to secondary school or performing a sizable role in public life, despite the pledges made last year by their spokesman, Zabihullah Mujahid. Should the UK recognize the Taliban government or the US also recognize the Taliban government and try to work with more moderate elements within it? Will this make things worse or better for Afghan women?
Well, it's again the Taliban themselves do a lot of their decisions by consensus, and it only takes a few Taliban to object to something, say women and girls in higher education, and it won't happen because even if the majority of the Taliban are willing to allow women to continue education past the sixth grade, so it's been a disaster, and the Taliban themselves, every time they make one step forward, starting to work on some sort of improving the banking system or trying to fix the disastrous economy, every time they sort of move forward, they do something else that moves everything backwards, attacking the media, or especially this issue with not allowing women to go to school above the sixth grade. There's 6 or 9 provinces now where they actually do allow women to continue beyond the sixth grade, but that's about it. And despite the amount of pressure coming from the Arabic world and the Gulf states, as well as the West, the Taliban have not been able to reverse this decision to not allow women beyond the sixth grade schools. It's terrible.
Well, the international community is actually, very worried about the state of the fate of the girls, especially the young one among them, the ladies generally. Do you think if they are not allowed to go to school, it will not be out of place to have them to study online? Should that be adopted rather than, okay, if they are having issues with them going to 4 walls of the classroom, maybe they can study online? Do you think that's very feasible?
Yes, it is. And in fact, there are several programs that are allowing women to study online. But of course, that requires cell phones, it requires working infrastructure. It requires a lot of things. And are the Taliban trying to prevent that? In many cases, they are. So, yes, that is an option and it's one way to go, but it can't replace schools, it can't replace colleges and universities and allowing women there. I mean, think about this. As bad as the economy was after the Taliban came in and all the foreign aid stopped, it's even worse when you take half your population and say you're not allowed to work anymore, including an amazing amount of expertise within the women of Afghanistan. Not to mention all the Afghans who fled, the brain drain that happened right after the Kabul fell. So it's really, really bad situation.
Well, since you've been a member of the Afghan American Chamber of Commerce, for a while now, you must have seen a lot of things. Probably the media closed its eye to, or probably people don't really discuss in the public space. What are these, challenges, or what are these concerns that you would like to share as we have this conversation? That you think if this thing is put on is bring to the table, they will be able to resolve all of the lingering crises within Afghanistan so that the country can be stabilized again?
The economy is in shambles. The currency is literally worn out. They don't have enough currency. It's being printed abroad, or has been printed abroad, but nobody's going to ship it in because of all the sanctions and the fact that the Taliban still don't allow women to go to school. So no country really wants to engage with the Taliban. And thus the economy, which was bad, just keeps getting worse and worse. We managed to get through last year with, although there was hunger and problems from drought and so on. But this next winter is going to be even more difficult. And again, the Taliban have no expertise, and there's problems if you're trying to get credit to ship in food or whatever for the private sector. That's a big problem. And again, everybody, all the big companies and the big banks are worried about the sanction system. Are they allowed to work with the Taliban to help get food in and relief in or not? Nobody really knows in some cases, and it's quite likely that the sanctions are going to get even worse because of things the Taliban have done. Al-Qaeda in the issue with the women in schools.
Well, apparently the problems of Afghanistan is far from over. Well, we'll see how things eventually pan out at the end of the day. A member of the Afghan American Chamber of Commerce, Doug Brooks, thank you so much for your time.
No, sir.
In Guayaquil, Ecuador, the Ministry of Economic and Social Inclusion has reported that an explosion has killed 5 people, injured 17, and affected at least 117 people. The explosion was allegedly as the result of a terrorist attack for which 7 people have been arrested, although the motives behind it have not yet been confirmed. The blast had a wave of 70 meters in diameter, leveling the surrounding area. The government has announced the issuance of contingency bonds to affected families. The problem of immigration challenge, the remote roadless crossing on the border between Colombia and Panama, known as the Darien Gap, consists of more than 60 miles of dense rainforest, steep mountains, and vast swamps. It's the only overland path connecting Central and South America, Over the past few years, it has become a leading transit point for migrants in search of work and safety in the United States because government officials have cracked down on other routes by air and sea. However, migrants face many challenges on this land journey northward, including difficult terrains, exposure to disease, and violence at the hands of criminal groups. As the number of migrants grows, so too does the impact on indigenous communities whose lands they often traverse. Government officials and international organizations are seeking to manage the crisis by setting up temporary housing and providing basic services to those arriving in Panama where resources are rapidly being depleted. Now, as the war between Russia and Ukraine lingers, the international community is seeking a diplomatic end to the ugly situation that claimed the lives of many. Latest reports say a Russian strike in Kharkiv has killed at least 7 people and wounded 16 others. There is more in this report.
The former president of Colombia, President Juan Manuel Santos, and former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon are meeting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and pledging the support of the international community for the Ukrainian state in its ongoing war with Russia. Speaking at a press conference, Mr. Juan Santos said that the Ukrainian cause was worth supporting because Russia's aggression undermines the concept of national sovereignty. Mr. Ban Ki-moon and ex-President Juan Santos also visited the towns of Irpin and Bucha, where Russian troops have been accused of committing war crimes. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has also arrived in Lviv to meet the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Meanwhile, Ukraine's state emergency services say a Russian strike on Kharkiv has killed at least 7 people and injured 16 others. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky also says a block of flats was totally destroyed. He added that Ukraine will not forgive but take revenge. Rescuers are combing through the wreckage from the strike. In the Ukrainian resource city of Zatoka, 2 powerful explosions led to a massive fire outbreak which covered an area of more than 600 square meters. 4 people were injured. 2 recreation centers and 2 houses were also completely destroyed. In neighboring houses, the walls were cracked, the windows were blown out, and the roofs were blown away. The injured are in a moderate condition. Ukraine's South Operational Command reports that 2 rocket launchers were fired from aircraft over the Black Sea. They hit exclusively civilian buildings on the coast. Residents say missiles are constantly flying into the area.
The High Representative of the International Community in Bosnia, Christian Smith, has denied allegations that he tried to impose electoral reform that would not take into account the rights of people who do not belong to the 3 major ethnic groups of the country. He says he has been trying to unblock the country. Mr. Schmidt was responding to a question during a visit to the town of Kurzad and used the opportunity to strongly criticize Bosnia's political leaders for playing the blame game. He emphasized that the politicians in BIH have failed to reach an agreement for 15 years, so he considers himself a patient man just deblocking the country. In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro and former President Lula da Silva has finally met for the first time in their political careers. The country's electoral authorities have formally inaugurated the start of the electoral campaign season. During the ceremony, the electoral authorities celebrated the presence of both major parties despite the mutual ideological disagreement, which underscores the importance of a democratic process. Warning the people ahead of intense campaigns, Brazil's Attorney General said the diffusion of fake news should be shunned to ensure the country's democratic process is not undermined. In Yemen, thousands of students ought to have returned to their classes in the government-controlled areas in the southern part of the country. But a strike by teachers demanding a pay rise, along with the political disagreements between the parties, broke off the planned process for students. A few number of students returned to their schools in Aden, only to find empty classrooms. Most of the families are poor and have not got paid for several months. More than 22 million Yemenis urgently require humanitarian assistance. But China's first domestically developed COVID-19 oral drug has just been granted conditional approval by the country's National Medical Products Administration. Developed by Henan Genuine BioNTech, the drug has been delivered to 3 provinces with the help of Fosun Pharma. For the first time being, it's not temporarily included in medical insurance reimbursement. Last December, China's first ever domestically developed COVID-19 treatment received conditional approval from the National Medical Products Administration. That therapy uses a combination of neutralizing antibodies derived from patients' recovery. And China Provincial Emergency Management Department says 16 people have been confirmed dead and 36 others missing after a mountain flood hit Datong Hui and 2 autonomous counties in northwest China. Search and rescue efforts are still underway. The mountain flood has affected 6,000 to 145 people in 6 villages. More rains are forecast to hit the country over the next 24 years. Now, the Japanese fashion designer who broke into the world of French haute couture almost half a century ago, Hanae Mori, has died, aged 96. Hanae Mori earned the nickname Madame Butterfly for her signature motif, regarded as a symbol of Japan's growing status as a modern fashionable nation. She designed clothes for Grace Kelly and Nancy Reagan, as well as the wedding gown worn by the current Japanese Empress, Masako. Her career took her from Tokyo, where she started out making costumes for cinema, to New York and Paris. In 1977, her label became the first Asian fashion house to join the ranks of haute couture.